That's the culture that was going on then. So it really is a different feel here. So it kind of turned me off of general surgery. And then when I decided to do OBGYN, I knew I wanted to stay in New York. So I basically did rotations at NYU because I felt obligated because I may want to stay there. And then I did a rotation here at Sinai. I did one at Memorial. I did, Gynocology. So if you are going to pursue a career in whatever, hopefully now COVID is a little bit better, go to the places, like pick 3 places that you might want to go and, and shadow there or, whatever, or do your sub-I there. And so I did, at Memorial, I did Gynocology. Here I did MFM. And then at NYU, I did repro endo. And, this way I got a feel for the places, but more importantly, they got a feel for me. So I actually did, I did MFM here in February of my 4th year, and the matches, unless they changed it, it's still in March. So I had a terrible interview here. There was a guy that was the last year he did interviews, and I later found out that they re-ranked me because I did the sub-I. So, definitely, Jacqueline, you already matched, which is great, but for everyone else, whatever specialty you do, whether it's OB or anything, I definitely recommend going to a place. So that, it was my first choice to come to Sinai. Sinai to me was the best training program in the city. I still think it is, in part because of Elmhurst. So, I was very interested in doing clinical, and not necessarily doing a fellowship. Nowadays, more people do fellowships, although I think 4 out of 8 of our graduating residents are going into general OBGYN this year. So, that trend is maybe being reversed a little bit. Do you want me to keep going in terms of practice and stuff?
Does anybody have any questions up until this point? No?
Okay. So did my residency here, knew I wanted to live in Long Island, took a job out in Long Island in private practice. After 6 months, it was a 1-year trial. After 6 months, we sat down to have a contract negotiation. He totally changed the deal. And not a great experience with that. But so I came back to Mount Sinai, and Mount Sinai was opening a multi-specialty group, which consisted of 3 people, 2 primary care docs and 1 OBGYN in Westchester. So I knew I was living in Long Island, but they had this opportunity in Westchester. So I said I would do that as long as I would have office hours here at Sinai. So I had an office hours at Sinai, had office hours in Westchester. I was delivering at a hospital affiliated with Sinai in Westchester and delivering in Mount Sinai, running around like a lunatic while living in Long Island, starting with 0 patients and building a practice. So after 2 years, this obviously was not really tenable, but I had built up the practice more in the city than in Westchester. And I did 110 deliveries, like in my 2nd year of practice. And then the person that I had worked with to join Sinai, she was leaving, and she suggested that I go into private practice because this was working for the hospital. And, they really weren't helping me so much in terms of, I said, I need another person to join. And they said, well, I would have to pay for them. And I said, well, you're not paying me all that much. So, the bottom line is, I think, the lesson to be learned here is you got to adapt. So when I had come back to Sinai, I said, I could see myself doing this for 30 years. And after 2 years, I ended up going into private practice. So I gave up Westchester just because it was the smaller part of what was going on. And I built up the practice in the city, first renting space. And slowly but surely, we built our group practice. I started with 1 office in Manhattan, took somebody on to join me. And then we expanded into Brooklyn because I developed a following in the Orthodox community in Brooklyn. So we started with 1 office in Brooklyn, and then we took on a 3rd doctor. We eventually had another office in Brooklyn, this one in Williamsburg. If you've ever been to Williamsburg, it's right near Peter Luger's. And then finally, we took on a fourth doctor. And about 6 years ago, we were kind of approached by Sinai to come back and work full-time again. So what I would tell you is that in private practice, we were watching many of our referral sources join the hospital anyway, and they were kind of drying up. So this seemed like a good time. They were opening up this multi-specialty building on 85th Street right near our office, because our office was on 84th and Park. And this seemed like a great opportunity to get into a multi-specialty practice. At the same time, they asked us to go to their Brooklyn Heights office, which is also a multi-specialty, practice. So, the only way we're able to do that was to add more doctors. So we went from 4 to 6, and now had 4 offices. Then about 4 years ago, I was approached to become the senior medical director for faculty practice. So that is a job that's administrative, where I'm in charge of the ambulatory practices that are on the Upper East Side and Brooklyn Heights and some other places around the city, not just for OB, but for every single specialty. So I said, well, if I'm going to do that, then we need a 7th doctor. So we took on a 7th doctor. And now I'm like 70% clinical and 30% administrative, but at least that's on paper. I'm probably 80% administrative and 80% clinical, which adds up to more than one, which is interesting. So that is really my saga. And I think what to learn from that is really that, you have to kind of adapt, and things change, and just be prepared to change. And you may enter a job and say, well, this is great, but you have to evolve over time.
Thanks so much. Questions, folks?
What are the main differences between working fully in private practice and then seeing patients when you're associated with the hospital?
So that's a great question, actually. And we've made it seamless. So our patients who come to us really have no idea that we're actually working for the hospital, because we maintained. So when we first went to the hospital, we maintained our own billers, and we brought our entire staff. We even had our own call center that we brought with us. But as time has gone on, we were using our own EMR system, because you can imagine with 4 offices, paper charts were like deadly. So we actually went to an EMR system in 2007. We were probably the first ones in the OB department to do that. And it was a boutique EMR system, but we designed all our notes, which made it great, but it didn't function as well as Epic on a grand scale. Plus, when you go to the hospital, you're on Epic, and it wasn't communicating. So ultimately, after we joined, once they were able to accommodate all 4 of our offices, we went with Epic. And the advantage of that is we had a separate computer system for notes. We had a separate computer system for billing, and then we had a network manager, because the system kept crashing every other day. So with Epic, you don't have that. We have great support. The system does go down, but not very, very frequently. And if it is, it's fixed rapidly. And it was costing us like $200,000 for those 3 entities. Whereas when you work for the hospital, it's free, right? So you're not charged for that. You are charged, though, to support the medical school, right? So we pay a certain percentage of everything that comes into the practice goes to support some to the faculty practice, some to the dean, which helps support the medical school and the research. And then we pay a fee to the department as well. So it's a different kinds of expenses. Overall, I would say it's kind of a wash. So some things you get better and some things you don't, and there's an economies of scale that you have because things are cheaper that when the hospital purchases them. So overall, I think we certainly at least came out ahead, if not even, as to when we were in private practice. But OB is a little bit different than most of the other departments because we function as revenue minus expense. Whereas a lot of the other departments, like take primary care, they wouldn't make any money if they were revenue minus expense, right? Their expenses are higher than what they're bringing in, but they're crucial to the hospital, right? Because without primary care referring to everybody, where would, all these practices be? So we support them. So they are paid, and they may be RVU based, which is relative value units, right? So it's kind of set what each code is worth. So a surgery may be worth X amount, and they have to generate that. So, when the powers that be look at it, they look at productivity. So after you do your residency in OBGYN and you get a job, you have to really, have a lawyer look at it who's well-versed in contracts for healthcare. And you have to understand what your contract is based on. How are they paying you? So, initially you maybe get a guaranteed salary till you can build up, but then that guarantee will go away. And how, do they expect you to generate your own patients? Will you be given patients? So, for example, when younger doctors come out of residency and join our practice, we have such a great referral system that we don't expect them to generate anything. And we've never had a productivity problem because, we have a really good process about interviewing, and people come in and they work hard. We don't say like who did the delivery, or, how many surgeries did you do, or how many patients did you see? We just they get paid a certain amount. And then if, the practice does well, they get a bonus as well. So, we kind of have a unique situation in our business model, but overall OB here at Sinai is unique than other departments. Did I fully answer that question, or?
Yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you.
Other questions, folks?
Yeah, I'm wondering, what are the benefits of doing a fellowship versus staying in general OB, and how do you make that decision?
So I'll tell you, whatever you pursue, you should do what you like, right? I think that's the most important. If you're going to do something for many, many years, you have to be happy at it. OB has really evolved, in terms of there's so many different specialties. You can do family planning, you can do repro endo, you can do MFM, you can do GYN-onc, you can do minimally invasive surgery, Urogyn. So, and believe it or not, Mount Sinai has fellowships in all of them. So, I think you have to get a feel, because you'll get exposure. You may not know prior to starting your residency. I talked to some of the residents, and they, some of them come in knowing that what they want to do. Like there was one who, like, her first night on OB was like, I'm not really interested in OB. I'm going into gynecology. So as an intern, I probably wouldn't say that to an attending, especially on the labor floor. But in general, I mean, she was very clear of what she wanted to do, and she pursued it, and she became a gynecology. But a lot of people, in their first or second year really don't know, and they're getting exposed to all these different areas. So, I really loved OB more than being in the OR. So I knew I didn't want to do gynecology. I considered MFM, but honestly, I wanted to finally make a living right after all of this. And, maybe times are different now, and, everyone's circumstances are different. But, doing a fellowship's another 2 or 3 years, in addition to the 4 years of residency. That's a long time. So, but if you're really committed, MFM, most MFMs don't do a lot of deliveries. If you really love doing deliveries, MFM may not be the way to go. We have 2 MFM practices at Sinai. One works for the hospital and one is private. The private ones, they do a lot of deliveries, but it's not the MFMs. They hire generalists to do most of the deliveries. They do most of the consultations, and they do the procedures. So, they used to come to the hospital more, but now they don't do as many deliveries. The group that works for the hospital, the MFM group, they don't do a lot of deliveries. So if you're really interested in doing deliveries, then you might want to do general, and you still get to do GYN surgery, and you still get to see patients. Like in the office, we do procedures, and it's 50-50. So, every day is different. And because we have so many different offices, every day is really different, because we have such an eclectic practice that every office you go to, you're dealing with a totally different subset of patients, and it keeps you on your toes. So that stimulates me. But if you really love the OR, you might want to pursue gynecology or minimally invasive surgery.
Is that a decision that most people make during residency, or is that something to start thinking about now as a medical student?
Well, I mean, if you're fully committed to OB and you know you want to do that, I mean, you can always start thinking about it now, but you may change your mind, right? So again, I started medical school thinking I want to do cardiology for no real reason. But, once I got to third year, I changed my mind. So it's really what you're exposed to, and everyone's experience is different. I know you guys have a lottery and you get to pick kind of where you go, but maybe where you do something changes how you feel about that particular area as well. If you do it at Elmhurst, you may feel one way. If you do it at Sinai, another way. If you do it, I don't know if you go to Beth Israel or used to go to Englewood. I don't know if you guys still do that, but I mean, I loved Elmhurst when I went there as a resident. It was just, an amazing experience. When I did OB as a medical student for NYU, I did it at Bellevue and I did it at Booth Memorial, which is in Queens. It was like a community hospital. And I think I went into OB more because of Booth than even because of Bellevue.
Dr. Adler, can you talk a little bit about COVID and how it impacted your practice and kind of the lessons learned, and as we're, at the height of it, and then lessons learned as the rates have gone down, and just how a private practice can prepare, if at all, for something like this?
Well, I don't think anybody was prepared, which is unfortunate. So COVID, for OB, we didn't really stop, right? Most of the other specialties stopped except for, ENT was really busy. The ED was overwhelmed, and obviously the units. But we didn't stop, and it was scary, right, in the beginning, right? You're getting different recommendations every day. You have no idea what PPE you should be wearing, and you figure you're going to get it, and God help you, right? So, who knows? After a while, when we saw that it wasn't that terrible, in terms of like, we weren't getting it. We were wearing masks. The patients were wearing masks. We kind of calmed down a little bit. Right in the beginning, we were like wearing hazmat suits to do the delivery. So, it was just crazy in the beginning. But as time has settled, I gotta be honest with you. All these people out there that say masks don't matter, I don't understand it. I really don't, because none of our doctors ended up getting COVID that we know of from the office. None of our staff. Some people got it from the community, but clearly it wasn't in the office, because it wasn't like, 5 people got it all at once. So we were very careful, with our patients and with our practice, and we cut back on the number of patients seen, because we didn't want people waiting in the waiting area. We're still seeing less. We used to schedule like 5 patients an hour. Now we're scheduling 4 patients an hour. We used to have scribes in the office to help us with our notes, which enabled us to see more patients. Because of COVID, we got rid of that. One bad thing, we used to have medical students come to our practice, and because of COVID, that kind of stopped. So that's one thing we regret, and it's just it's still a little crazy. So we haven't gone back to that. But that's something I miss. We do have some of our docs that volunteer to do the, Jacqueline, you've been through it, so you have the small group discussions. So one of our docs did that. I had done that as well, but then when I became senior medical director, I said, there's not enough hours in the day. Personally, COVID has helped and hurt, because I really have 3 jobs. So, aside from seeing patients, I also run the practice. And we could talk about that in terms of running a practice. But I also have this administrative role, and what COVID did was all the meetings are now virtual. So they were able to schedule more meetings, which is bad and good. What I had done in my schedule before COVID was I blocked out time. So I would have meetings in a row, but I would do them, I would have to go to the meetings. So it was set that way. Now they just throw meetings anytime. So I could see patients for 2 hours, then have a meeting, then see patients again, and then have another meeting. And it's really hard to switch gears, and you're like rushing from one thing to another. So that in some ways has made my job harder.
Other questions? Uche, Eva?
Have there ever been points of clarity, either like specific patients or just in general, where you're like, oh, I'm really happy that I chose this field?
So my first C-section ever at Elmhurst. So the way the residency was set up, and now it's changed, but we had 4 months of medicine. In our first year, we had 4 months of GYN and 4 months OB. So my luck would have it, I did 4 months of medicine first, all at Elmhurst. And then I did 2 months of GYN, and then I came to, Elmhurst OB in January, and everybody thinks that you know what you're doing, but I had never done a delivery. So I get to do the C-section, and sonograms weren't what sonograms are now. So this was a term undiagnosed abdominal pregnancy at 37 weeks. So I'm doing the C-section. My chief was not the best chief ever. So I'm going very slowly. We get to the uterus. You're supposed to like feel the uterus and see how it's oriented. And I obviously didn't know what I was doing, but I hope she did. So we cut the uterus, and the problem was the baby wasn't in the uterus, right? So, we basically, she cuts, and obviously she goes past the uterus because the baby was behind the uterus. We deliver the baby, and we see the uterus is like half flopping in the breeze. As an intern, I quickly scrubbed out and got every single attending at Elmhurst and lots of blood products. It turned out, yes, the lady had a hysterectomy, which is unfortunate. I think she was like 41, and this was her last chance or whatever, but the baby was fine. They tied off the placenta because it was adherent, it was attached everywhere. She ended up getting methotrexate, she did well. So, but, an aha moment, I guess, was like, anything can happen. And as a resident, I think I had a black cloud, because every time I came onto the floor, there were like 18 deliveries, and it was crazy, but it was a great experience, and which is why I loved Elmhurst. Any questions on like administrative stuff? Not too excited, huh?
I was going to ask you, Dr. Adler, what is a typical day, or is there one?
No, there is not.
Right.
I wish there was.
Right.
A little bit. So I could tell you a typical week, because everyone else in the practice has to rotate more than I do, but I could not do what I do if I didn't have some order. So Monday mornings, I have meetings, but now we're actually down a doc, so I actually see some patients as well. Monday afternoon, I see patients, and then Monday evenings, I have meetings. Tuesday, I see patients for about 6 hours, and then more meetings, doing stuff. Wednesday is my day in the hospital. So I do C-sections, I do deliveries, I do surgery, I do more meetings mixed into everything. I'm not the only one in the hospital, because depending on the number of meetings I have, it may be hard to be available imminently for every single delivery. On Thursday, I go to our Brooklyn offices. And on Friday, I have office hours in the morning till about 1, 2 o'clock, and then more meetings. So, and then the weekend, I spend catching up on all the things I can't do during the week, and running the practice. So one of the things that I've done, and I'm not telling you guys to do this, but I will tell you that when you're in practice, whether you work for the hospital or you're in private practice, you need to watch out for your billing and make sure that it's getting done. So I actually had always done that. We all the EOBs, which are explanation of benefits from the practice, would come to me when we were in private practice, and I would review them and give them to the billers and tell them what to do. When we joined Sinai and we went on Epic, we don't see the EOBs anymore. They go to the central billing office, but we kept billers on site because we just wanted to have our own control. But I had them do a report. So I actually go through every single claim that comes into the practice and send, on the computer, instruct our billers what to do. So this gives me a sense. And as part of my role in administratively, but also there's something called the IPA, which is the organization that negotiates contracts for our doctors, and there's a separate unit that negotiates for the hospital. But I've been co-president of the IPA for the last, 15 years. So even before I took on this administrative role, I was very involved. In fact, there was one insurance company that I negotiated a contract with, nice dog, that I negotiated a contract with, that Sinai then took our, just for our practice. And Sinai then built off of that negotiation and that contract, and they now have a contract with that insurance company. They never had a contract with them. So we now have a fee schedule. So by being involved in the negotiations and the billing, this way I was able to see. There's also things by reviewing that I've caught for the whole system when insurance companies are making mistakes. The one that I caught recently is Oxford had always paid in full for like all the maternity care. So we bill for all of maternity care. We bill for all the visits. We bill for the delivery, and we bill for the postpartum visit as one global fee. And most insurance companies, there's a portion that goes to the patient. Oxford always paid in full. I noticed about a month ago that this seemed to change because we started getting bills for the patient, that the patient owed money. So I alerted every single, I alerted the CBO, and this is key, right? Because we normally, if we know that a patient owes, we try to get them before the delivery. But now, we weren't doing that for Oxford. So now the whole OB department knows about it. Hey, Dr. Colvin.
Hi, sorry, I just finished office hours. I don't want to miss this.
No worries. We've been having a lovely conversation.
Okay, I'll let you continue.
No, we were just talking about administrative stuff and billing and paying attention that when you're in practice, whether you work for the hospital or whether you're in private practice, that you still have to pay attention. And even if you are fully salaried, and you work for the hospital, they can still come to you and say, well, you're not bringing in enough, right? So you want to make sure that your billing is getting done. You want to, have some sense of what's going on in the business of medicine.
Yeah, hopefully you didn't. This is not repeating anything. But how did you learn the skills that you need?
Because I had to, I guess. So I told everybody that when I first went into practice, I started in Long Island, and that lasted all of 6 months. But managed care was really kind of starting then, and he didn't really take managed care. So he insisted that I take managed care. So I had to learn all about managed care and contracts and things of that nature. That lasted only 6 months. And I came to Sinai and I started my practice from scratch. So, basically, which is unusual and really unusual these days, but, you really had to learn on the fly. So I, had to hire people, and, first I worked for the hospital. So I was able to build up a practice, but I still had to really watch and grow, because although I was salaried for a couple of years, I knew that after that, the guarantee would end. And then after 2 years, I ended up going into private practice anyway, and kind of taking the practice with me. But Sinai's policy, as is every other institution, is they keep your AR. That's your accounts receivable. So I went into practice. I had to take loans to pay for the first few months. I had to pay for malpractice, which for OBGYN is kind of not slight. So I had to cover the first, let's say, 4 or 5 months of practice. But because I was able to take my practice with me, because they were my patients, right? Patients are power in a sense, right? They at least they used to follow the doctor. I don't know anymore. There's less loyalty these days sometimes. But, you know, I was able to even turn a profit in my first year in private practice.
And your role as the medical director for the
Faculty practice.
FTA?
Yes.
Okay. And is that taking skills that you learned along the way? Or did you have to learn a lot, you know, in terms of, did you do any, I guess, courses or training or anything like that to prepare yourself for that role?
So it kind of came out of the blue, honestly. You know, I had been involved in different committees, you know, while I was in private practice. And then when we had joined Sinai, I think the person who was in charge of the faculty practice got to know me through my role as the co-president of the IPA. And they wanted somebody who was business savvy. Some of the things that, you know, from being a medical director, I had to learn, right? So, you know, not being in primary care, although OB is kind of primary, I didn't really know about macro or MIPS. So now I'm the co-chair of that committee, and you know, my role has continued to expand, and you know, I'm learning on the fly. So initially, I didn't start with emergency management, but now I'm one of the, you know, have to be involved in emergency management, and which came in handy. So I was helping them run arm intruder exercises and things of that nature. So I didn't go for any special, you know, additional training. A lot of the business operations, a lot of stuff I came with, and I think the medical director part of it, which was not operations and business side, you know, I kind of had to learn.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely one of those things where I think now going through medical school, maybe there's a greater awareness, although I don't really know how much is actually built into the curriculum. Yeah, but I feel like it's probably one of the most important things to know about, and you just don't have a formal way of getting trained in it.
So, you know, I thinking about it though, you know, prior to even medical, to becoming a resident or a doctor, I just had experiences that I think helped prepare. So in college, I had worked in politics. So I had worked for a state senator throughout college, and I helped run campaigns and, you know, learned, you know, how to deal with people on a different level. But that was something that really helped in terms, I had to give speeches for the senator. So in terms of getting up in front of an audience, that was really helpful. And then in medical school, I was class president for 3 out of the 4 years, and I had to organize things and run things. We had to, you know, was responsible for getting all the equipment for the second years before that they would go see patients. I think you guys as second years are doing that now. I organized events where I probably got about 50 to 70 people, you know, providers from different departments to come have lunch with our second years. And then it was so successful the third years where, you know, this people like you're having this call, they were able to have lunch with providers from all the different departments, which would help them. I don't know if you guys do anything like that, but that might be something that is really rewarding as well for the second year class.
Getting them hooked up with which
I got providers as a class president for second year. We had a luncheon where providers came from all the different departments, and the second years would sit and have lunch with them and rotate from table to table of what they might be interested in.
Yeah,
now, I don't know if you could do that with COVID, but
yeah, but I think they have like a residency fair, but I'm not sure. Well, you meet with the different specialties, but I'm not sure if that's for the second years or the first years. You guys know?
I think it must be for second years because I haven't seen it yet, but that sounds great.
I don't know about that either though.
Are you a second year or you're?
I'm a second year.
Okay.
I
think it might be coming up because I feel like I got an email about it, but I think that's probably the closest thing they have to. But okay, so I have to ask, are you two related?
This is my dad.
Okay. just had to ask. Are you interested in OB or?
So I don't really know yet. I'm still waiting for next year to really see what. I'm really just open to everything.
That's like the I would say like the highest form of flattery is to have your own child go into medicine.
It is. It is definitely is. So I got 1 out of 3.
Oh, okay, all right.
I'm the youngest, so my 2 older brothers didn't want to go into medicine, so I didn't really have a choice.
By default, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I really hate to interrupt and ask questions that have already been asked. So I'll let you guys finish and I'll go on mute.
I have one more question. Do you have any advice for how to best prepare for my OB rotation? Like something you noticed with medical students, especially in OB, that I should know?
So I don't know if it's unique to OB, but I mean, some students come and they, if they clearly don't want to do a specialty, they don't seem interested. So, even if you think you really want to do OB, when you get to all of your clinical rotations in 3rd year, I would, just be motivated and just show interest and be there and learn, because you don't know what's going to be in the future. You don't know what your experiences will help with in the long run. So even if by the time you get to 3rd year, you're still into OB and that's what you clearly want to do. Clearly, when you get to OB, say you want to do OB, right? I mean, that's always helpful. But don't go on the side and read. Go in and say, I want to be there for the deliveries, whether it's Elmhurst or whether it's Sinai, and be motivated. But I would do that for every single rotation.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Uche, what year are you?
I'm a 2nd year as well.
And also trying to decide what you're
Sorry?
also trying to decide what you're interested in.
I'm interested in something surgical as well, but definitely keeping the door open to most things. And just here to really learn about everything that OB has to offer. Yeah.
I guess since you have experience with both private and being like on, what would you say are the biggest differences between those 2 types of practices?
So we had talked a little bit about that before. One of I think we're kind of unique because we kind of kept our private practice model despite joining the hospital, and they kind of let us do our own thing. So, it didn't really change all that much. And for our patients, they really don't experience any difference. We have these 4 offices, we still run them. We have our own practice manager. We kept many of our staff, although that's changed over the years as people have retired. And I mean, we have some staff that have been with us for over 20 years.
Oh, wow.
So they stayed with us through private practice, into working for Sinai. One of the benefits for the staff was that their benefits got better by joining the hospital. So, our benefits are better for, doctors, but also the employees got better benefits. The expenses are different, as we kind of mentioned before. Like, we don't pay for computers, but we do pay, Dean's tax and a OB department tax. And in the long run, we've kind of, it all balances out in the wash. And you have more support by working for the hospital, and you have more referrals, right? So we're in 85th Street, which has 20 primary care docs, and it has ENT, and it has dermatology, and it has cardiology, and we all refer to each other.
Yeah.
So it's really worked out as a win-win for both us and for Mount Sinai.
Okay. So you're in that
We're in 85th Street.
Okay. Yeah. That is a nice setup there.
We're also in Brooklyn Heights, which also has the same kind of setup. It's just on 2 floors. So, lots of people had come to Brooklyn Heights in the OB department before us and really couldn't make it work. But then we came in and we, as a having already a name in Brooklyn and already having 2 other offices in Brooklyn, it really helped, build it up. So now we have like a 2-month wait for like new patients in Brooklyn Heights.
Oh, wow.
So we're trying to maybe get a second doctor to be able to come there from our practice on a daily basis.
Wow, that's great. So you already had an established name there, and then just geographically moved a little bit.
Well, we had 2 satellite offices in Brooklyn. We have one in Ditmas Park near Flatbush, and we had one in Williamsburg. but they're different catchment areas. So, you know, we had started an office in 1998 in Brooklyn before Mount Sinai talked about networks or increasing catchment areas. So, you know, I had always envisioned an office without walls. And once, you know, we were able to have EMR, it made it so much more doable.
Yeah.
So it was hard in the beginning with paper charts and trying to fax over things and get to the labor floor. So it was challenging, but it was still very worthwhile, you know, from a practice point of view. And it was, from a patient perspective, they didn't have to travel into the city for all their visits. They just only had to come to Sinai for their, you know, for their delivery.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like even like East Side versus West Side, people don't even want to cross the park for care. So,
But they do. I mean, we have
will,
lots of people from the West Side,
Yeah.
you know, that come to 85th Street.
Yeah.
You know what I would say to everybody is, believe whether you think that it's crazy or not. I can't tell you how many people come to me as a new patient and said, I said, well, why did you come? And they said, well, I looked you up online and you have great reviews. So, you know, the reviews matter, whether we like them or not, and bad reviews matter too. So one of the things I've done as part of being senior medical director is we have a whole C2C program, commitment to caring. And I started a provider communication program, and we've trained over 400 providers with it. It's an hour-and-a-half session where it's interactive. We show videos, we talk about the videos, we do breakout groups, and we suggest certain, you know, tips on how to communicate better with patients. I think you guys have something similar in some point of your medical school training. And, you know, it's the one, it has over a 90% approval rating for the program, which is something unusual at Mount Sinai, that, you know, 90% of people will say it's a good thing, but it is because it's interactive. And, you know, if I always tell people, if they can get like 5 new ways of communicating, little tips, making eye contact, sitting down, you know, and always at the end to sum up like what, you know, what happened in that, or do the teach back method where you have the patient say what, you know, what happened at that session. And even if it adds like 30 seconds or a minute to each interaction, it overall helps your practice because there'll be less questions, there'll be less my chart messages. So it's been really successful. And then we developed 6 other modules where people can go on peak and deal with individual problems. So I know you guys have something similar, but, you know, do pay attention. And I think communication with your patients is really critical.
Yeah, I think one of the best pieces of advice I got was I always call all my patients the day after surgery, because they're always going to have, you know, you can talk to them after the anesthesia. A lot of times they're out of it. They don't remember anything. And then that one phone call probably saves like 10 phone calls. So yeah, it's sort of little things. Yeah.
Not just saving the phone call, it shows empathy, right? You know, that you care, that you want to know that, you know, so we try to call our patients like a week after the delivery, make sure that they're doing okay.
Yeah.
How long is your typical relationship with your patients?
I mean, I've had some patients since I started the practice in '94. And I now have some of the people that I've delivered are now my patients.
Oh, wow.
So see, that's the great thing about OB. There is surgery, there is medicine, and there is continuity of care. You know, so it offers a lot. I will not lie, though, it is not an easy lifestyle, right? So, you know, it is hard to get up at 3 a.m. and rush to the hospital. But it's very rewarding.
Thank you. I have to run across the street for another meeting, but thank you so much, Dr. Adler.
My pleasure.
This was great. And it was nice to meet you.
Same here.
Uche or Ava, you can ask your dad a question anytime.
Yeah, I was like, I don't want to take over.
Any other questions? Jay? All right, thank you. All right, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Dr. Adler.
And Jason, if any students come to you that couldn't make it tonight, because I know it's crazy busy for them, just send them my way. And
will.
I can, if they want to do shadowing in the first or second year, I can put them in touch with the right people.
Wonderful. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that'd be
Thank you.
great.
Thank you.
And not just OB, right? So, I mean, anything in our faculty practices, I'm sure we can figure out something.
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Have a
you.
good one.
Take care. Have a good night.